I was putting on my shoes when my phone vibrated with that blood-chilling force. It was Robert, my accountant. The message read, "Mary, call me now. Don't go to David's house today. Please." My hands trembled so much that the phone almost slipped. I was wearing my pearl earrings, the ones David gave me 10 years ago for Mother's Day. I was wearing the beige dress he liked so much. I had been prepping my grandchildren's favorite dessert, apple pie, since 6 o'clock in the morning. And now this. I dialed Robert's number with shaking fingers. He answered on the first ring. His voice sounded different, tense, as if he was holding back something very heavy. "Mary, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt, but you need to know it now, before it's too late." I sat on the edge of my bed, the bed where I had slept alone since I was widowed 12 years ago. The bed where I cried every time David stopped answering my calls. The bed where I asked myself 1,000 times if I had been a good mother. Robert began to speak, and every word was like a nail in my chest. 3 days ago, David came to my office. He didn't know that I am your accountant. He asked me to prepare some documents to transfer your house into his name, documents to empty your savings account, a power of attorney that he was going to have you sign today at that lunch. "Mary, everything is planned out. Your daughter-in-law, Lucy, even has the exact words they are going to use to convince you." The world stopped. The clock read 11:15. In 45 minutes, I would be knocking on my son's door in suburban Dallas. In 1 hour, I would be sitting at his table. And according to Robert, in 2 hours, I would have signed my own ruin. "They have the papers ready," Robert continued, and his voice was breaking. "They're going to tell you it's to protect you, that it's because of your age, that it's easier if something happens to you. They're going to use the kids as an excuse. They're going to make you feel like it's what's best for everyone." I looked around my room. The walls I painted myself when I became a widow. The curtains I sewed by hand. The picture of David at his college graduation, smiling, with that gleam in his eyes that I thought was love. How many nights did I go without dinner to pay for his university tuition? How many extra jobs did I take so he could have what he needed? I sold my mother's jewelry. I sold my husband's car. I even sold the living room furniture so my son could study business administration and have a better future than mine. And now he wanted to take everything from me. Not ask for it, not talk about it. Take it. As if I were an obstacle. As if my existence was a problem to be solved. As if the 69 years of my life were worth nothing. Robert kept talking, but I could barely hear over the sound of my own heart breaking. "Mary, I have copies of the documents. I reviewed them. They are perfectly drafted to look legal. If you sign today, in 48 hours, your house will be in David's name. In 1 week, your savings will be gone. The $42,000 you saved up in 30 years of work. $42,000. Every cent earned cleaning other people's houses. Every bill saved instead of buying myself new clothes. Every sacrifice to have something secure in my old age. And my son knew it. He knew exactly how much was in that account. Because last year, when I lent him $5,000 for his business, I showed him my statement so he could see that I could indeed help him. He never returned that money. And I never asked him for it because a mother doesn't charge, I thought. A mother gives without expecting anything in return. But this wasn't asking. This was stealing. Stealing with papers. Stealing with fake hugs. Stealing with a Sunday lunch. "Robert," I said, and my voice came out as thin as a thread. "Are you completely sure?" There was a silence on the other end. Then his answer, clear and painful. "Mary, I have the documents on my desk right now. They are dated for today. They have a space for your signature, and they have a clause that says you willingly agree to transfer all your assets because you can no longer manage them alone. This is not a mistake. This is a plan. I got up from the bed and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was 69 years old, but in that moment she looked 100. Red eyes, trembling hands, the beige dress that suddenly seemed like a ridiculous costume. Who was I trying to fool? Who was I trying to believe still mattered? My only son had been setting a trap for me. Not since yesterday. This had been going on for a while. This required planning. This meant that every time he called me in the last few months, every time he asked about my health, every time Lucy was kind to me, it was all a lie. It was all preparation for this moment, for this lunch, for these papers, to erase me. I looked at the picture of David on the wall. He was 5 years old in that picture, smiling with his front teeth missing. He was wearing the red shirt I bought him at the flea market. I was hugging him and he had his little hands around my neck. In that picture, he loved me. In that picture, I was his world. At what point did I stop being his world? At what point did I become a problem? At what point did my love stop mattering and only my money mattered? Robert was still on the phone, waiting. "What do I do?" I asked him, although a part of me already knew the answer. "Don't go, Mary, don't go today. And come to my office tomorrow. We need to legally protect your assets before they try anything else." Anything else. As if this was just the beginning. As if my son was already thinking about the next step, the next lie, the next way to get me out of the way. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of my room. The apple pie was ready in the kitchen. My shoes were on. My earrings were sparkling. But I wasn't going anywhere. I called David. He answered on the third ring, with that falsely cheerful voice that I now recognized for what it was. An act. "Mum, are you on your way? The kids are asking for you." The kids. Always the kids as a shield, as an excuse, as a tool for manipulation. "David," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. "I'm not going to be able to make it today. I don't feel well." There was a silence that was too long, a silence that confirmed everything Robert had told me. "Not well? What's wrong?" His voice had changed. It was no longer cheerful. It was tense. Worried, but not about my health. Worried because his plan had just fallen apart. "I just need to rest. We'll reschedule." Another silence. "Mum, we have everything ready. The kids want to see you. Lucy made your favorite meatloaf." Lies. All lies. "I'm sorry, son. I'll talk to you later." I hung up before he could insist, before he could convince me, before he could use that voice that always worked, that voice that made me feel guilty for existing, for needing, for being alive. I took off my shoes. I took off my earrings. I took off the beige dress. And I put on my old pajamas, the ones with a hole in the shoulder, but the most comfortable in the world. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea that I didn't feel like drinking. The phone started ringing. It was David. I didn't answer. It rang again. I didn't answer. Then a text message arrived. "Mum, are you okay? We're worried." Worried about me, or worried because their plan had just failed. I stared at that message for 5 full minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I understood something I should have understood years ago. My son didn't love me. My son loved what I could give him. I sat in that living room until the light changed color and the afternoon turned orange. The tea grew cold in my hands. The phone kept ringing, but I no longer looked at it, because images began to appear in my head. Memories. Moments that at the time seemed normal, but that now, with this new truth upon me, took on a completely different meaning. Like when you watch a movie for the second time, and you understand all the clues you missed the first time. I remembered David's birthday 6 months ago. I arrived with a German chocolate cake that I baked myself. I knocked on the door, and Lucy opened it with that smile that never reached her eyes. "Mary, what a surprise," she said, even though I had confirmed my visit 3 times that week. "We didn't know you were coming today." But they did know. I had called the day before. David had told me, "Yes, Mum, come at 4 o'clock." And when I arrived at 4 o'clock sharp, the house was full of people I didn't know. Their friends, work colleagues, neighbours, but no place for me. I stood in the corner of the living room holding my homemade cake, while everyone ate the expensive bakery cake they had bought. No one tried mine. At 5:30, Lucy told me in that soft, venomous voice, "Mary, I think David is tired. Maybe it's better if you leave so he can rest." I left, with my whole cake, and I cried all the way on the bus because I thought the problem was me, that I had arrived at a bad time, that I was too sensitive. But that wasn't it. It was that I was an annoyance. I was redundant. I was the old mother who didn't fit into their new life. I remembered last Christmas, David called me on December 23rd. "Mom, this year we're doing something small. Just the 4 of us. The kids want a quiet Christmas." The kids. Always the kids. I said yes, that I understood, that it was no problem. I spent Christmas Eve alone eating gingerbread cookies and watching television. But 3 days later, I saw the photos on Facebook. David had hosted a huge dinner. His friends were there. Lucy's parents were there. Even the aunts and uncles who live in another state were there. Everyone was there. Except for me. In the photos, everyone was smiling. The kids had Santa hats. There was a giant tree. There were presents everywhere. There was a table full of food. And I didn't even know that party had existed. When I asked David about it days later, he said, "Oh, it was a last-minute thing, Mum. We didn't want to bother you." They didn't want to include me. But I swallowed that lie as I had swallowed all the others. I remembered when I turned 68 last year. I wasn't expecting much. I've never expected much. But David called me in the morning and said, "Mum, we'll stop by for you today. We're going to celebrate." I put on my best blouse. I styled my hair. I put on makeup with that lipstick I hardly ever use. I waited from 11 o'clock in the morning, noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock I called David. He didn't answer. At 4 o'clock he sent me a message. "Mum, sorry, something came up with Lucy's work. We'll do it tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. A week later, David showed up with a wilted bouquet of flowers that he had clearly bought at the supermarket. "Sorry, Mum, you know how it is." And I said yes, that I understood, that it didn't matter. But it did matter. Every slight mattered. Every lie mattered. Every time they made me feel like I was a burden, it mattered. I just didn't see it. Or I didn't want to see it. Because accepting that your son doesn't love you is accepting that something in you is broken. And I wasn't ready for that. I remembered all the times I lent him money. Not just the $5,000 for the business. Before that, it was $2,000 to fix the car. Before that, $1,500 for the children's uniforms. Before that, $800 for the dentist. Before that, $500 for, I don't know what emergency. It was always emergencies. It was always urgent. And I always said yes, because a mother helps. A mother gives. A mother doesn't let her child suffer if she can avoid it. But David was never suffering. David had a new car. David and Lucy went out to nice restaurants on weekends. David had just replaced all the furniture in his living room. I know because I saw the photos Lucy posted. Photos of their perfect life, of their perfect house in suburban Dallas, of their perfect children. And I commented on every photo. So beautiful, honey. What a blessing. And she never replied. Not even a thank you. Not even a heart emoji. Nothing. I remembered the time I got sick 4 months ago. A bad flu that kept me in bed for 3 days. I called David to tell him I couldn't get up, that I had a fever, that I needed someone to buy me medicine. Mum, I'm in an important meeting. Can't you ask a neighbour? A neighbour? He was asking me to beg a neighbour for help before coming himself, before sending Lucy, before truly worrying. In the end, it was Mrs. Helen, my neighbour on the 3rd floor, who bought me the medicine and made me some chicken noodle soup. Mrs. Helen, who barely knew me, showed more love in those 2 hours than my son had in 2 years. And when I told David about it later, he said, "That's good that Mrs. Helen was there. We were just really busy that week." Always busy. Always with something more important. Always with a perfectly constructed excuse to make me feel like I was asking too much by expecting a minimum of attention. I remembered Mother's Day this year. David sent me flowers via delivery service. They arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning with a card that read, "To the best mum, we love you," a generic message that was probably pre-written on the website. He didn't even take the time to write something personal. And the flowers were cheap, I could tell. Simple carnations, no roses, nothing special. The type of arrangement that costs $15, while I had given him $500 the month before for some children's thing. But I put those flowers in a vase. I took a picture of them. I posted it on my Facebook with the caption, "Thank you, my beautiful son, for these lovely flowers." Because that's what mothers do, right? Pretend that everything is fine. Pretend that we are loved. Pretend that our children value us. Because admitting the opposite is admitting that we failed at the only thing a mother is supposed to achieve, that her children love her. I remembered all the times the kids would ask me, "Grandma, when are you going to visit us?" And I would say, "When your dad invites me, sweetheart." And the child would say, "But I'm inviting you now." And then Lucy's voice would come from the background. "Kids, Grandma is very busy. Don't bother her." Busy. Me, who had nothing but time. Me, who would have walked barefoot over broken glass to spend an afternoon with those kids. Busy was code for, "We don't want her here." And the kids grew up believing that I was the distant grandma, the one who didn't visit, the one who didn't call. When the truth was that every time I tried to get closer, Lucy built a new wall. Every time I suggested taking them to the park, there was an excuse. Every time I offered to babysit, they already had plans. Every time I asked about their grades, about their friend, about their lives, the answers were short and cold. As if my questions were invasive. As if my interest was inappropriate. The living room became completely dark. It was almost 7 o'clock in the evening. The apple pie I made was still in the kitchen. I threw it in the trash. I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. Every piece of that pie represented my naivete, my stupidity, my denial. Because I knew, somewhere deep down. I always knew that something was wrong, but I chose not to see it. I chose to believe the lies because the truth was too painful. Because accepting that your son uses you is accepting that you gave everything and received nothing. The phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from Lucy. "Mary, David is very worried. Are you okay? We need to come over." We need to come over. As if they had ever come over without needing something. I read that message 3 times, and in each reading I saw the poison hidden in those apparently kind words more clearly. They weren't worried about me. They were worried because today I should have signed those papers. Today I should have fallen into the trap, and I had escaped. I did not respond to Lucy's message. I left the phone on the table and stared at the ceiling of my living room. That ceiling that I knew by heart. That small crack in the corner that I always promised to fix but never did. That damp spot that appeared every winter. That ceiling that I had seen in my sleepless nights, in my lonely mornings, in my moments of joy and in my days of sadness. That ceiling was more constant than my own sun. The truth fell upon me like ice water. It wasn't gradual, it wasn't gentle. It was brutal and complete. My son didn't love me. Maybe he never loved me. Or maybe he loved me when he was a child, when he needed me, when I was useful. But somewhere along the way, that love transformed into something else, into convenience, into habit, into opportunity, and finally into this, into a plan to steal from me, to erase me, to take the only thing I had left and leave me with nothing. I got up from the sofa and walked around my house, my small two-bedroom house that I bought 20 years ago with the severance pay when the factory closed. This house that I cleaned and repaired with my own hands. This house where every piece of furniture has a story. The armchair I bought second-hand and upholstered myself. The table that belonged to my mother. The curtains I sewed at night after work. The plants in the window that I care for as if they were my daughters. This house was going to belong to David in a couple of days. If I had been dumber, if I had trusted him for 1 minute longer, if I hadn't had an honest accountant who warned me in time. This house where I mourned the death of my husband, where I raised my son alone, where I survived poverty and loneliness, where I grew old believing that at least I had this, a safe roof over my head. All of this was going to disappear with a signature, with a lunch, with a well-constructed lie. I went into my room and opened the drawer where I keep my important documents. The deed to the house, the bank statements, the insurance policies, my will. Everything was there, organized. Because I am an orderly woman, a woman who has always been responsible, a woman who worked since she was 15 and never owed a cent to anyone, a woman who broke her back in hard labor so her son wouldn't have to. I took out my will. I wrote it 5 years ago. In it, I left everything to David, the house, the savings, the small life insurance policy, everything. Because he was my only son, my only family, the only person in the world who carried my blood and my dead husband's last name. I read every line of that document and felt something inside me break completely, not with noise, not with drama, but with a deep and terrible silence. What kind of son does this? What kind of man plans to steal from his own mother? Not on an impulse, not in a moment of desperation, but with time, with legal documents, with the help of his wife, with coldness, with calculation, as if I were a business, as if my life were a transaction, as if the 69 years of existing, working, loving, and sacrificing myself meant absolutely nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed with the will in my hands. I thought about tearing it up, about burning it, about changing it right now. But I didn't. Because tearing up that paper wasn't going to change anything. The damage was already done. The betrayal already existed. The son I thought I had was never real. He was a fantasy I constructed because I needed to believe that all my suffering had been worth it, that all my sacrifices had created a good man, a grateful man, a man who honored his mother. But David was not that man. David was a stranger with my last name, a stranger who learned to smile at me at the right moments, A stranger who knew exactly what words to use to keep me hopeful. A stranger who rationed every visit, every call, every gesture, to get the maximum with the minimum effort. And I was so blind, so desperately blind. I put the will back in the drawer. Tomorrow I would go with Robert to protect my assets. Tomorrow I would begin to legally dismantle any possibility of David touching my estate. But tonight, this long and dark night, I just wanted to feel the full pain. I wanted to let it pierce me, because I knew that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. After tonight, I would be a different person. A person who no longer believed in fairy tales about the unconditional love of children. The phone rang again. This time it was a call, not a message. It was David. I saw his name on the screen. I saw the photo I have of him, the one where he is smiling. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, 4, until it cut off. Immediately he called back. I let it ring again until it cut off, and then again, and again. 5 calls in 10 minutes. That was his desperation. Not for me, but for his failed plan, for his interrupted theft. Another message arrived, this time more direct. Mum, answer. I need to know you're okay. If you don't answer, I'm coming to your house. A threat disguised as concern. If I didn't respond, he would come. And if he came, what would he do? Try to convince me? Bring the papers anyway? Invent another lie? I wrote back, each word like a heavy stone. I'm fine. I just need to rest. Don't come. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow. That word he always used to postpone confrontations, to avoid conflicts, to keep the peace. But this tomorrow would be different. This tomorrow, I would be in Robert's office protecting what was mine. This tomorrow, I would begin to build legal walls that David could never cross. This tomorrow, I would stop being the foolish mother and become something I never thought I would have to be. My own defender. I lay down dressed on the bed. I didn't have the strength to put on my pajamas. I didn't have the strength for anything. I looked at the dark ceiling and thought about all the times I had slept in this bed, dreaming of a future where David and I were close, where he visited often, where the grandchildren spent the weekends with me, where I was the present grandma. Loved, important. That future was never going to exist. That future was another fantasy I had built to survive the loneliness. The reality was this. I was alone. I was always alone. Since my husband died, loneliness has been my only constant companion. But I disguised it as giving David space. I disguised it as respecting his adult life. I disguised it as not being an intrusive mother-in-law. When the truth was that they had pushed me out years ago, and I simply accepted staying there, in the cold, in the distance, waiting for crumbs of attention that came less and less often. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. Scenes replayed in my head in a constant loop. David as a child, asking me to read him a story. David as a teenager being embarrassed that I picked him up from school in my cleaning uniform. David as an adult introducing me to Lucy with a forced smile, as if to say, "This is my mother. Sorry about her." David a month ago asking to borrow $500 while planning to steal $42,000. Every image hurt. Every memory was a new wound on top of old wounds that had never healed. But there was something else beneath the pain. Something small and hard that began to grow in my chest. Something that was not sadness or self-pity. It was rage. A cold, clear rage. A rage that did not shout but observed. A rage that did not destroy and built. A rage that said, "I will not allow this. I will not be a victim. I will not disappear just because they want me to disappear. I opened my eyes in the darkness. I was no longer crying. The tears had dried at some point that I didn't notice. My breathing was regular. My mind was clear, clearer than it had been in years. Because finally, after so long living in denial, I saw the whole truth. And the truth, although painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to justify. I no longer had to torture myself asking what I had done wrong. I had done nothing wrong. I was the best mother I could be with what I had. I gave everything I could give. I loved with every fibre of my being. The problem was never me. The problem was David and Lucy and their greed and their coldness and their capacity to look at a 69-year-old woman and think, how can we take advantage of her? Instead of, how can we take care of her? I got up from the bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. I went to the kitchen and made myself a strong coffee. I sat at the table where I had eaten alone so many nights. The same table where I had studied with David when he was a child. The same table where I had cried over bills I couldn't pay. The same table where I had celebrated each of my birthdays alone in recent years. And at that table, at 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday, I made a decision. I was going to fight. Not with shouting or scandals, not with cheap revenge or drama, but with intelligence, with strategy, with the same strength that had kept me alive all these years. David had underestimated his mother. He thought I was weak. He thought I was foolish. He thought I would sign any paper he put in front of me just to feel his love for 5 minutes. He was wrong. And now he was going to find out who Mary Taylor really was. Not the submissive mother, but the woman who survived everything and wasn't going to give up now. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I was knocking on Robert's office door. He was waiting for me with coffee brewed and that look of concern that only people who genuinely care have. I sat across from his desk, and there they were. The documents. A stack of perfectly organized papers that represented my son's betrayal in black ink on white paper. Robert didn't say anything at first. He just pushed the folder toward me carefully, as if it were a bomb that could explode at any moment. I opened the folder with hands that no longer trembled. The night had burned away all the fear I had left. Now there was only clarity. The first document was a general power of attorney. I read every line. In that paper, I supposedly authorized David Taylor to act on my behalf in all legal, financial, and patrimonial matters, to sell, to buy, to transfer, to dispose of everything that was mine, as if it were his. And at the end, there was a space for my signature, an empty space that should have been filled today. Is this legal? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Robert leaned back in his chair and sighed. If you had signed it voluntarily, yes. That's the problem, Mary. These documents are perfectly drafted. An expensive lawyer did them. Someone who knows exactly what to do to make everything look clean and legal. Someone expensive. That meant David had spent money on this. Money that probably came from the $500 I had lent him last month. The second document was worse. It was a purchase and sale deed for my house. In it, I supposedly sold my property to David for the sum of $1. $1. As if my house was worth nothing. As if the 20 years of monthly payments meant nothing. As if the sweat and tears that every square foot cost could be summed up in one coin. And beneath the amount, there was a note that read, "Sale between relatives for mutual love and consideration." Love. That word made me feel sick. Robert pointed to another paragraph. Look here. It says that you are selling the house because you wish to ensure your son's future, and that you are doing so free of any pressure or external influence. That protects them legally. If you ever tried to claim it back, They would say you did it voluntarily out of a mother's love. Every word was calculated. Every sentence was a trap. This was not David's work alone. This had Lucy's fingerprints all over it. The third document was a bank authorization. With this paper, David could access all my accounts, withdraw money, close accounts, transfer funds, all without needing my presence. "How long have they been planning this?" I asked. Robert took out another paper. "I found something else. David came to see me for the first time 3 months ago. Not that time. He didn't know I was your accountant. He asked me, hypothetically, how he could help his aging mother better manage her finances." Aging. 3 months. This was not new. This had been brewing for a while. Robert continued. "I told him the best thing was to talk to you directly, that you could make your own decisions. He left that day without hiring my services. But 2 weeks ago he returned, this time with all these documents already prepared. He just needed someone to review them and certify that they were well done. He didn't know I knew you. When I saw my name on the papers, I almost fell out of the chair. I looked at Robert with a gratitude that I couldn't express in words. If he hadn't warned me, right now I would be signing my death warrant. I would be handing over everything. I would be left with nothing. What do I do now? Robert already had papers prepared. First, we protect everything legally. We're going to create documents that nullify any future attempt at appropriation. Second, we change all your bank passwords. Third, we put alerts on all your accounts. And fourth, you need to decide what you want to do about David. That last question hit me. What did I want to do about David? Report him? Confront him? Cut off all communication? Forgive him? Every option seemed impossible, because every option meant accepting that my life as I knew it had ended. Robert let me think while he prepared the new documents. I kept looking at those papers of betrayal. So perfect, so legal, so cold. "I want to confront him," I finally said. "But not yet. First, I need to protect myself. Then I need to understand how far this goes." Robert nodded. "There's something else you should know. I did a little research. Your daughter-in-law, Lucy, has a history. 6 years ago, she tried something similar with her own mother. She convinced the woman to put a house in her name. The mother was left with nothing and now lives with a sister. Lucy sold the house and never gave her a cent." The air escaped my lungs. Lucy had done this before. She had already destroyed a mother. And now she was coming for me. And David knew it. He had to know it. That meant my son was not just an accomplice. He was an active participant. He had seen what Lucy did to her own mother and thought, let's do the same to mine. That revelation was worse than everything that came before, because it eliminated any possibility that David was manipulated or deceived. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Give me the papers," I told Robert. "I'm going to sign everything necessary to protect myself." We spent the next 2 hours building legal fortresses around my estate. I signed documents establishing that any transfer of assets required the presence of 2 witnesses and an independent attorney. I signed papers that blocked any future power of attorney. I signed authorizations for the bank to call me personally before approving any transaction in greater than $100. We changed all my passwords. The bank ones, the email ones, the social media ones, everything. Robert taught me how to activate 2-step verification. He explained how to recognize fraud attempts. He gave me the number of a lawyer specializing in elder abuse cases. Because that's what this is, Mary. This is elder financial abuse. It's a crime. And if you wanted to, you could report it. Report my own son? The idea turned my stomach. But it also made me think. If I did nothing, How many other mothers would suffer the same? How many elderly women would be signing papers right now without understanding that they were giving away their entire life? I put the lawyer's number in my purse. I didn't know if I would use it, but knowing that option existed gave me a strange sense of power. I left Robert's office at 11 o'clock in the morning. The sun was shining brightly. The street was full of people coming and going with their normal lives. And I was a different person. I was no longer Mary, the naive mother. I was Mary, the protected woman. The woman who knew the truth. The woman who had built walls where before there were only open doors. My phone had 17 missed calls from David and 11 messages. I didn't read them. I wasn't ready yet. I got home and locked the door, something I never did during the day. But now everything was different. Now I knew I had enemies, and one of them was my own son. I sat in the living room with a new notepad I had bought on the way. On the first page I wrote, "Evidence." Because if I was going to confront David, I needed to have everything clear. Every lie, every manipulation, every sign I had ignored. I started writing dates. The day he asked for the $5,000 and never returned it. The day he cancelled my birthday. The Christmas where I was excluded from the party. Every cancelled visit. Every excuse. Every time Lucy kept me away from the grandchildren. Page after page filled with evidence of a clear and deliberate pattern. They weren't coincidences. It was a plan of progressive distancing. First, they distanced me emotionally. Then came the financial theft. I took out my phone and started reviewing our messages. I saved them all. Every conversation where David asked me for money with promises to pay it back soon. "Mum, it's only $2,000. I'll pay you back next month. I promise." That was a year ago. I never saw that money. I took screenshots of everything. I saved them in a special folder. Evidence, proof that this didn't start yesterday. This was a pattern of years. I checked my bank account online. I made a list of every transfer I had made to David in the last 3 years. I added it all up. $12,800, almost $13,000 in loans that were never repaid. And I hadn't kept track. I hadn't asked for it back. Because a mother doesn't keep accounts, I thought. A mother gives without expecting anything in return. But David did keep accounts. David knew exactly how much I had and how much he could take before going for everything. I called the bank. I asked to speak to a manager. I explained my situation without giving too many details. I just told her I needed to protect my account from unauthorized access. The manager was kind and efficient. She helped me set up a secret code that would be required for any change in my account. She gave me her direct number. She said, "Mrs. Taylor, I'm sorry you're going through this. We see these cases more often than people think. Seniors being scammed by their own children. You did the right thing to protect yourself." Seniors being scammed by their own children. That was me. That was my case. I was a statistic. A number in some report on elder financial abuse. The idea angered and saddened me at the same time. I hung up the phone and kept working. I searched online for information about Lucy Miller, her maiden name. I found her social media profile. Photos of her perfect life. Her decorated house. Her trips. Her dinners at expensive restaurants. All paid for with whose money, I wondered? With David's money. And David's money came in part from me. I kept searching. I found old local newspaper articles. And there it was. A court case from 6 years ago. Lucy Miller sued by her own mother for misappropriation of assets. The case was closed because the mother withdrew the lawsuit, probably out of shame. Probably because reporting your own daughter is almost emotionally impossible. Probably for the same reasons I was now hesitant to report David. I printed everything. The articles, the bank statements, the messages, the dates, the names. I put together a complete file. If I was going to confront David, I wanted every piece of evidence ready. I didn't want him to be able to deny anything. I didn't want him to be able to flip the situation and make me feel guilty. This time, I had the power. This time, I had the documented truth. This time, I wasn't going to let him manipulate me. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Mary Taylor?" a male voice asked. "Yes, this is me." The voice continued. "This is Attorney Paul Davis. Robert Vega forwarded me your case. I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There is something else you need to know about your son's plan." My heart raced. Something else? What could be worse than what I already knew? I arrived at Attorney Davis's office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He was a man in his 50s, with a serious face and direct manners. I sat across from him and noticed he had a folder with my name on it. "Mrs. Taylor," he said, "I did a little investigation after Robert told me your situation, and I found something disturbing." He took some papers out of the folder. "Your son and daughter-in-law applied for a loan 2 months ago, a loan for $30,000. Do you know what they put up as collateral?" I shook my head, although something inside me already knew the answer. "They put up your house, Mrs. Taylor, your house, the one that is still in your name. They presented false documents that claimed the house already belonged to them. The bank rejected the loan because upon verification, they found that the property is still registered in your name. But they tried to use your house as collateral without your knowledge. That is fraud." Fraud. The word echoed in the office like a gunshot. If they had managed to get you to sign those papers on Sunday, their plan was to go back to the bank on Monday with the new deed, get the $30,000, and disappear. You would have been left with a mortgaged house that you didn't know was mortgaged and with empty accounts. Attorney Davis looked at me with a mixture of compassion and professional anger. "Mrs. Taylor, this is not just a son who wants to inherit early. This is a well-planned criminal scheme." I remained silent, processing the information. $30,000 plus my $42,000 in savings plus the value of my house. David and Lucy planned to leave me on the street without a cent, and I would have signed everything with a smile on my face, believing I was doing something good for my family. Attorney Davis continued. "I have contacts at the bank. I got copies of the loan application. Here are the forged signatures. Here is the fraudulent document. This is enough for a criminal complaint." I took the papers with trembling hands. There was my signature. But it wasn't my signature. It was a pretty good imitation, but not perfect. Someone had practiced copying my signature. Someone had had access to my documents to study how I signed. And that someone had to be David. He was the only one who had seen my personal papers. He was the only one who had been in my house with access to my documents. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice breaking. Attorney Davis leaned back in his chair. "That depends on you, Mrs. Taylor. Legally, you have all the tools to report it. This is fraud, document forgery, and attempted misappropriation of assets. Your son could face serious criminal charges. But I understand that this is your son, and that decision is not easy." It was not easy. It was impossible. It was the most painful decision in the world. "For now," the lawyer continued, "the most important thing is that you are protected. The documents you signed with Robert are solid. Your estate is legally shielded. Your son cannot touch anything. But you must also decide whether you want to confront him or simply cut off contact. And you must decide whether you want this to have legal consequences or if you prefer to keep it private. 3 options, none of them good, all of them painful. All of them meant accepting that my family as I knew it had died. I left that office with more information than I wanted to have. The sun was beginning to set. I walked aimlessly through the streets of my neighborhood. I passed the park where I used to take David when he was a child. I sat on a bench and watched the young mothers playing with their children. They all seemed so happy. They all seemed so sure that their children would love them forever. And I had been one of them. I had been that mother who believed that love was enough, who believed that giving your best guaranteed receiving something in return. But it wasn't like that. You could give everything and receive betrayal. You could love with every fiber of your being and be used. You could sacrifice your entire life and end up being seen as an exploitable resource. A mother's love guaranteed nothing, except pain if you chose the wrong son, or if your son chose the wrong partner, or if life simply decided to teach you this lesson in the most brutal way possible. I got home when it was already dark. I turned on all the lights because the darkness made me feel lonelier than I already was. I made myself a cup of tea that I wasn't going to drink. I sat at the kitchen table with all the evidence spread out in front of me. The false documents, the bank statements, the screenshots, the dates, the names. Everything was there. The complete and documented truth. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. I could ignore everything. I could pretend I never knew anything. I could continue to be the mother who calls on Sundays and sends gifts at Christmas. I could swallow this betrayal as I had swallowed all the previous ones. But if I did that, who would I be? A coward? A fool? A woman without dignity? No. I had been that woman for too long. I had accepted too many crumbs. I had justified too many absences. I could cut off contact completely, block his number, change my will, disappear from his life as he had tried to disappear me. But that didn't feel right either, because it meant he would get away without consequences. It meant he could continue his life as if nothing had happened. It meant he would never have to face what he did. And I needed him to face it. I needed to look him in the eye and show him that I knew, that I always knew, that I wasn't as foolish as he thought. Or I could confront him, face to face, with all the evidence, with all the truth. I could give him the opportunity to explain himself, even though there was no possible explanation. I could see if there was anything left of that boy who hugged me with his little hands. I could look for some trace of remorse in his eyes. And if I didn't find it, at least I would know that I tried, that I gave him one last chance to be the son I needed him to be. That last option scared me more than all the others, because it meant opening the door to the greatest pain. It meant facing his rejection directly. It meant hearing him say out loud what his actions had already screamed. But it was also the only option that gave me peace, the only one that wouldn't leave me wondering what if for the rest of my days. I took my phone. It had 32 missed calls from David now, dozens of messages, some worried, some angry, the last ones almost threatening. "Mum, answer. I need to know you're okay. If you don't answer, I'm calling the police to check on you." The police? How ironic. He was threatening to call the police while I had enough evidence for the police to arrest him. I took 3 deep breaths. Then I wrote a message. "David, I need to talk to you. Come to my house on Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Just you. No Lucy. No kids. This is important." I sent the message before I could regret it. The reply came in less than a minute. "Mom, thank goodness. We were so worried. Are you okay? Why can't I bring Lucy?" I replied firmly. "Just you. Saturday at 2 o'clock. Or we don't talk ever again." I had never spoken to him like that. I had never set conditions. I had never threatened to cut off contact. But this time was different. This time I had the power. I saw the 3 dots indicating he was writing. They disappeared. They reappeared. Finally, his response came. "Okay, Mom. I'll be there. Just tell me you're okay, please." I didn't answer him. I left the message on read. Let him worry. Let him feel some of the anxiety I had felt all my life waiting for his calls. The next 3 days were strange. I cleaned my house like never before. I washed curtains, I polished the furniture, I tidied every corner. Not because I wanted to impress David, but because I needed to do something with my hands. I needed to keep my mind busy so I wouldn't go crazy thinking about what was coming. Mrs. Helen, my neighbour, knocked on my door on Thursday. "Mary, are you okay? You look different." I smiled tiredly. "I'm fine, Helen. Just preparing for something important." She looked at me with those wise eyes that only women who have lived a lot have. "It has to do with your son." I hadn't told her anything, but neighbours always know. They always notice. I nodded without giving details. Helen put her hand on mine. "Mary, I don't know what happened, but I know you're a good woman. And I know that sometimes our children fail us in ways we never imagined. If you need anything, anything at all, knock on my door, day or night." Her words broke me a little. It was the kind of love that David should have shown, and that an almost stranger neighbour was giving me. On Friday, I prepared everything for Saturday. I organised the documents in chronological order. I practiced what I was going to say in front of the mirror. "David, I know what you were planning to do." No, too direct. "David, we need to talk about some documents." Too soft. "David, why did you try to steal from me?" Too aggressive. In the end, I decided I wasn't going to practice anymore. The words would come when they needed to come. I brewed coffee for 2. I took out the good cups, the ones I only use for special occasions. This definitely qualified as a special occasion. On Saturday, I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, even though David wouldn't arrive until 2 o'clock. I took a shower. I put on a simple but dignified dress, dark brown. I styled my hair. I put on a little makeup. Not because I wanted to look good for my son, but because I wanted to feel strong. And when I look put together, I feel more secure. I looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was no longer the same as a week ago. This woman had harder eyes, a firmer mouth, a straighter back. At 5 minutes before 2 o'clock, I put all the documents on the living room table. I formed 3 piles. One with the evidence of his lies and unrepaid loans, another with the false documents of the theft plan, and the third with the papers from the attempt to mortgage my house. In the center of the table, I placed a photograph. It was from when David was 8 years old. We were hugging in front of this same house the day we bought it. We were both smiling. We both seemed happy. I put that photo there to remind us both of who we once were. At 2 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would jump out of my chest. I walked to the door. I took a deep breath, and I opened it. David was standing on the threshold with a nervous smile. He was wearing a white shirt and jeans. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. He probably hadn't slept well, thinking about why I had summoned him like this. "Hi, Mum," he said, and he tried to hug me. I took a step back. He noticed the rejection, and his smile wavered. "Come in," I told him in a neutral voice. He walked in, looking around as if searching for signs of what was happening. "Sit down," I instructed, pointing to the sofa across from the table where I had placed all the documents. He sat down slowly. His eyes fell on the papers, and I saw his face change. First confusion, then recognition, finally fear. Mum, what is all this? His voice tried to sound casual, but it trembled. I sat in the chair across from him, the table with the evidence between us like a battlefield. That's exactly what you are going to explain to me, David. I picked up the first pile of documents, the bank statements with all the transfers marked in yellow. $12,800, I said, showing him the papers. That's what I loaned you over the last 3 years. Loans you never repaid. Loans you promised to pay and never did. David tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. No, you speak when I finish. $12,800 is not a small amount of money for a woman who lives on a pension of $450 a month. I had to stop buying medicine sometimes. I had to eat less. I had to sacrifice. But I did it because you are my son, because I love you, because a mother makes sacrifices. David opened his mouth to speak, but I continued. I picked up the second pile, the false documents, the power of attorney, the purchase and sale deed, the bank authorization. I placed them in front of him like cards in a deadly game. These are the documents you were going to have me sign last Sunday, the day of the lunch, which was never a lunch. It was a trap to steal everything I own, my house, my savings, my entire life, all for $1 and a signed paper. His face went white, completely white. Mum, I can explain. His voice was barely a whisper. Then explain. I told him with a calmness I didn't know I had. Explain how a son plans to steal from his own mother. Explain how you forge documents. Explain how you practice copying my signature. Explain how you look me in the eye and tell me you love me while you plan to leave me on the street. The words came out of me like knives, each one sharp, each one accurate. David ran his hands over his face. When he removed them, his eyes were red. It wasn't my idea, he finally said. It was Lucy. I laughed. It was a bitter, dry laugh. Lucy? Oh, sure. Blame your wife. As if you don't have a mind of your own. As if you weren't present at every step of this plan. I picked up the third pile of documents, the mortgage attempt, the forged signatures. Was this Lucy's idea too? When you tried to mortgage my house without my knowledge? When you forged my signature to get $30,000? He stood up. How do you know all this? Who told you? Not shame. Anger because he was discovered. Sit down, I ordered him with a voice of steel. He sat. I remained standing. I wanted to look down on him. I wanted him to feel how small he was at this moment. How do I know? Because I'm not the foolish old woman you think I am. Because I have people who look out for me more than my own son. Because Robert is my accountant, and when you came to him asking for help with your fraudulent documents, he warned me. I saw the realization hit him. Robert. His perfect plan had failed because of a detail he hadn't foreseen, that the accountant he hired was my accountant. The irony was almost comical. David, I said, sitting down again, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer me with the truth. Did you ever love me? Was I ever anything more to you than a source of money? Tears began to roll down his face, but I no longer believed his tears. I had seen too much. Mum, of course I love you. You're my mother. His voice was breaking. But we're desperate. We have debts. Lucy's business failed. We owe money to dangerous people. We needed that house. We needed that money. It was going to be temporary. We were going to take care of you. We were going to... I interrupted him by hitting the table with my hand. Temporary? You were going to take care of me? David, these documents left me with nothing. No house, no savings, nothing. Where was I supposed to live? On the street? In a nursing home? Or were you just hoping I would conveniently disappear? The silence that followed was the answer. He had never thought about that. Or worse, he had thought about it and didn't care. Do you know the saddest thing of all? I continued. It's not that you tried to steal from me. It's not that you forged my signature. It's not even that you used me my whole life. The saddest thing is that I would have given everything willingly if you had just asked me. If you had come and told me, Mum, I'm in trouble. I need help. I would have sold my house. I would have emptied my accounts. I would have slept under a bridge if it meant saving you. Those words broke him. He started sobbing. I'm sorry, Mum. I am so sorry. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Lucy convinced me. She said you wouldn't notice, that you would be better off. What? I stared at him. Lucy did the same thing to her own mother 6 years ago. You knew that. I saw in his eyes that he did know. You knew that. And yet you thought it was a good idea to do the same to me, your own mother. The woman who carried you for 9 months. Who worked 2 jobs so you could go to school. Who sold her dead mother's jewelry to pay for your college. I got up and walked to the window. I couldn't look at him anymore. I had to decide this week whether to report you, whether to call the police and have you face legal consequences for fraud and forgery. The lawyer told me I have a case, that you could go to jail. I heard him choke behind me. Please, Mum, no. The children. Think of the children. I turned around so fast that he flinched. Now you think of the children. When you planned to leave their grandmother homeless, you didn't think of them. When you kept me away from them, you didn't think of them. Don't use my grandchildren as a shield. You never thought of them. You only thought of yourself. I sat down again. I was tired. So tired. I'm not going to report you. Not because you don't deserve it. You do deserve it. But because I'm not like you. I don't destroy my family no matter what. But this is what's going to happen. I took out other papers. The new documents Robert had helped me prepare. My house is now legally protected. You will never be able to touch it. My accounts have blocks and alerts. You will never be able to access them. My will has changed. You no longer inherit anything. Everything goes to a foundation that helps seniors who are victims of family abuse. I saw every word hit him like a punch. David, you chose money over me. Now you live with that choice. I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want your calls. I don't want your visits. I don't want anything from you. He stood up desperately. Mum, you can't do this. I'm your only son. We're family. I stood up too and looked him straight in the eyes. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't betray. You stopped being my family the day you decided I was a problem to be solved instead of a mother to be loved. I walked toward the door and opened it. Go, and don't come back. David stood there, crying, trembling. Mum, please, give me another chance. I can change. I'll leave Lucy. I'll go right now. I stopped him with a look. There's nothing left to save here. David, you destroyed everything. All by yourself. Now live with that. He took a few steps toward the door, but stopped. What if the kids ask about you? That question almost broke me. Almost. Tell them the truth. Tell them their father tried to steal from their grandmother and she had to protect herself. Or lie to them. You're an expert at that already. He walked out the door without looking back. I heard his footsteps going down the stairs. I heard his car engine starting up. I heard him drive away. I closed the door and locked it. I stood there, leaning against the door, until my legs gave way and I sank to the floor. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for the son I lost, for the family I never had, for the years wasted on illusions, for the grandchildren I would no longer watch grow up. But I also cried with relief, because I had finally spoken the truth. I had finally defended myself. I had finally chosen my dignity over my need to be loved. I cried until I had no more tears left. And when I got up from the floor an hour later, I was a different woman. A woman who had survived the worst. A woman who had fought and won. A woman who no longer needed anyone's love to know she was worthy. My own respect was enough. The first few days after the confrontation were the most difficult. The house felt emptier than ever, but it was a different kind of emptiness. Before it was an emptiness of unfulfilled hope. Now it was an emptiness of liberation. I no longer waited for calls that never came. I no longer made excuses for a son who didn't love me. I no longer lived in a lie. I lived in the truth. And the truth, although painful, was also clean. Mrs. Helen knocked on my door on Tuesday morning with a hot casserole. I don't know what happened Saturday, but I heard crying, and I know you haven't been out since then. I tried to tell her I was fine, but she simply walked in and put the casserole in the kitchen. Mary, you don't have to tell me anything, but you don't have to be alone either. She stayed all afternoon. We drank coffee. We watched a ridiculous soap opera. We laughed at the silly dialogue. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. She told me she had 3 children. 2 lived far away and 1 had died young. Sometimes I think the one who died was the only one who truly loved me, she said sadly. The others call on Christmas and my birthday. That's all. So she understood the pain of a mother who gives everything and receives crumbs. Her words comforted me, not because her pain was the same as mine, but because it reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that there were millions of mothers living this same silent betrayal. On Wednesday, I called Robert to thank him. Mary, how are you? Did you talk to David? I told him everything. Every word of the confrontation, every document shown, every tear shed. Robert listened in silence, and when I finished, he said, "You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you saved yourself, and that takes more courage than most people have." His words gave me strength. They reminded me that choosing my dignity was not selfishness, it was survival. On Thursday, I began to reorganize my life. Literally. I took all the pictures of David off the walls. I didn't throw them away. I couldn't, but I stored them in a box in the closet. I removed the emergency phone number I had taped to the refrigerator. Before it said, "In case of emergency, call David." Now it had Mrs. Helen's and Robert's numbers. I changed the priorities in my life because my previous priorities had betrayed me. I found David's childhood drawings in a drawer. Coloured hearts, houses with chimneys, happy families. "I love you, Mum," written in crooked letters. Those drawings were from a child I knew, a child who loved me sincerely. But that child no longer existed. He had become a man I didn't recognize. I stored the drawings with the photos, memories of a life that was no longer mine. On Friday, I left my house for the first time in days. I walked through the farmer's market. I bought fresh flowers for my living room. I bought ingredients to cook something that I liked. Not what David liked, not what I used to prepare, hoping for his visits, but something for me. A herbed roast chicken, roasted potatoes, a fresh salad. I cooked with music playing in the background. I set the table nicely. And I ate alone, but not sad. I ate in peace. That night my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me do it. "Mrs. Mary Taylor?" It was a young woman's voice. Yes, this is me. There was a silence, and then, I'm Gail, Lucy's mother, her real mother. I don't know if David told you about me. My heart raced. No, he didn't tell me anything. Gail sighed deeply. I imagine not. Mrs. Taylor, I heard through a mutual acquaintance what happened, what my daughter and your son planned to do to you. I needed to call you. I sat down slowly. You are the woman Lucy stole her house from years ago. Another long pause. Yes, and I wanted to tell you that you did the right thing by protecting yourself. I didn't. I signed everything they put in front of me because I didn't want to believe that my own daughter could do that to me. And I was left with nothing. Literally nothing. I now live with my sister in a borrowed room. At 72 years old. No house, no savings, nothing. Her voice was breaking, but she continued. You were stronger than me. You defended yourself. And please, don't feel guilty. Our children made choices, horrible choices. But it's not our fault. We gave love. They chose betrayal. That difference is important. Don't carry their guilt on top of your pain. I cried, listening to her. I cried because her words were exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, was all I could say. Thank you for calling. Gail gave me her number. If you ever need to talk to someone who understands exactly what you're going through, call me. Anytime. We hung up, and I held the phone in my hand for a long time. Gail had lost everything, and yet she had the generosity to call a stranger to offer comfort. That was love. Real love. Not the manipulative, conditional love David had given me, but genuine, selfless love from a woman who understood my pain because she had lived it. On Saturday, a week after the confrontation, I woke up different. Lighter. As if a weight I had carried for years had finally fallen off. I realized that I hadn't checked my phone in the morning waiting for messages from David. I hadn't planned my day around the possibility of him calling. I hadn't lived for him. For the first time in decades, my life was completely mine. Mrs. Helen invited me to a group of friends who met on Saturdays to knit and talk. I hesitated at first, but then I thought, why not? I went. There were 6 women, all over 60, all with stories of absent children, of family that hurt, of chosen solitude over toxic company, and all of them surviving. All of them finding joy in small things, in genuine friendships, in days without drama, in peace. One of them, Teresa, told me something that stayed with me. Mary, blood makes you relatives, but respect and love make you family. And sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you were given. She was right. These women, whom I barely knew, showed me more genuine affection than David had in years. They asked me how I was and genuinely wanted to know. They helped me without expecting anything in return. They included me because they wanted my company, not because they needed something from me. I started going to that group every Saturday. I learnt to knit. We made scarves to donate to a shelter. We cooked together. We celebrated birthdays. We visited each other when someone was sick. We built a support network that was stronger than any blood tie. And slowly, very slowly, the hole David had left began to fill up. Not with another person, but with my own self-love, with my own company, with the certainty that I was worthy, with or without a son, with or without family. I was worthy. I officially changed my will. Everything would go to the Elder Abuse Protection Foundation. The lawyer congratulated me. Mrs. Taylor, this is going to help a lot of people. Your pain will be transformed into protection for others. That idea gave me purpose. My suffering had not been in vain if I could prevent other mothers from going through the same thing. I signed the papers with a steady hand. This was my legacy. Not David, but this. Real help for real people. Months passed. I never heard from David again. Not a call, not a message, not even on my birthday. That absence confirmed everything. He never really loved me. He only loved what he could get from me. And when that source dried up, I ceased to exist for him. It hurt. I won't lie. But it was a clean pain, a pain that healed, not like the previous pain that only got more infected with every new lie. My house no longer felt empty. Now I had real visits. Friends who came for coffee, Mrs. Helen who brought desserts, the knitting group that sometimes met in my living room. Genuine laughter, real conversations, human connection that did not depend on blood, but on mutual respect. This was my family now, a family I chose, a family that chose me back. And that, I discovered, was worth more than any forced genetic tie. 8 months have passed since that Saturday. 8 months since I confronted David. 8 months since I chose my dignity over my need to be loved by my son. And although the pain never completely disappears, I can say that I now live in peace. A peace I didn't know when I lived waiting for crumbs of affection. A peace that comes from knowing I did the right thing, that I defended myself, that I didn't allow them to erase me. My life is different now, smaller in some ways. I no longer have a son to call. I no longer have grandchildren to visit. I no longer have that fantasy of a unified family at Christmas. But my life is also bigger in other ways. I have true friends. I have days without anxiety. I have nights where I sleep peacefully knowing that my house is safe, that my savings are protected, that no one is planning to steal from me while I sleep trustingly. The knitting group became my family. We celebrate everything together. Birthdays, holidays, just Tuesdays for no special reason. We take care of each other when someone is sick. We lend each other money without expecting it back. We listen without judging. This is family. This is love. Not David's conditional love that only existed when I had something to give him, but genuine love that exists simply because it does. Mrs. Helen told me a month ago, "Mary, since all this happened, you look more alive. It's strange to say because I know you're hurting, but it's as if you've finally been freed from something that was slowly killing you." She was right. Living in denial was consuming me. Pretending that my son loved me when clearly he didn't. Justifying every slight, every lie, every absence. That was more painful than accepting the truth and moving on. I started volunteering at the Elder Abuse Protection Foundation, the same foundation that will inherit everything when I die. I work there 2 times a week. I help other seniors who are going through family abuse. I tell them my story. I show them that you can survive, that you can rebuild, that a child's love does not define your worth as a person or as a mother. I met so many women with similar stories, sons who stole, daughters who manipulated, families who betrayed. And all of them, absolutely all of them, blamed themselves. What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? Why am I not enough? I tell them the same thing I now tell myself. You didn't do anything wrong. You gave love. They chose betrayal. That difference is crucial. We can't control the decisions of others. We can only control how we respond. One afternoon in September, I was at the grocery store buying vegetables when I saw David. It was the first time in 8 months. He was alone. He looked tired, older. Our eyes met for a second. I saw something in his gaze. Remorse, shame, pain. I don't know. And the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. I looked away and continued with my shopping. My heart beat fast, but I didn't fall apart. I didn't run to him. I didn't talk to him. I simply continued with my life. Because that's what I do now. I move on. I don't know if David truly regrets it. I don't know if he ever understood the damage he caused. I don't know if Lucy is still manipulating him, or if he finally opened his eyes. And I have reached a point where those questions no longer keep me awake at night. He made his choices. I made mine. Our paths diverged, and it's okay for it to be that way. Not every story has a happy ending of reconciliation. Sometimes the happy ending is simply finding peace in the distance. I changed many things in my life. I started taking painting classes, something I always wanted to do, but never had time because I was busy being the perfect mother for a son who didn't appreciate it. I discovered that I am quite good at painting landscapes. I have several paintings in my living room now. Landscapes of places I've never been, but where I would like to go. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll travel. Maybe I'll use some of my savings to see the ocean, to see mountains, to live a little before it's too late. I also started writing. Not a book or anything formal, just a journal where I write my thoughts, my feelings, my healing process. Maybe someday someone will read it and find comfort. Maybe another mother who is going through the same thing will read my words and feel less alone. Maybe my pain will serve to light the way for someone else. And if that happens, then everything will have been worth it. I have learned that a mother's love is the purest and most dangerous thing that exists. Pure because you give without expecting anything in return. Dangerous because that generosity can be exploited by unscrupulous people, even if those people are your own child. I learned that loving does not mean allowing abuse, that setting boundaries is not a lack of love, that saying no more is sometimes the most important act of self-love you can perform. If I could talk to the Mary of a year ago, I would tell her, everything is going to be all right. You're going to go through hell. You're going to cry until you think you have no more tears left. You're going to question everything about yourself. But on the other side of that pain, there is freedom. There is peace. There is a version of you that is stronger, wiser, more complete. A version that doesn't need anyone's validation to know its worth. Today is Saturday. The knitting group is coming in an hour. Teresa is bringing her famous carrot cake. Helen promised to teach us a new stitch. Gail, Lucy's mother, also comes now. We became close friends. We share the unique pain of having been betrayed by our children, but we also share the joy of having survived, of having chosen to live instead of simply existing, waiting for love that never came. I made coffee. I took out the good cups, the same ones I used the day of the confrontation with David. But now I use them for something better, to celebrate real friendships, to honor genuine connections, to toast women who hold each other up when the world tries to tear them down. I look around my house. The walls I painted a new color, the plants that are blooming in every window, the paintings I painted myself. This house is mine, really mine, and no one is going to take it from me. I look out the window and see the clear sky. It's a beautiful day, and I think of all the mothers who are right now where I was 8 months ago, suffering in silence, justifying the unjustifiable, loving someone who doesn't love them back. And I want to tell them, you are enough. You were always enough. The problem was never you. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to say enough. You have the right to choose your peace over their convenience. Life after betrayal is possible. It won't be the life you imagined. It won't be the family you dreamed of. But it can be good. It can be full. It can be yours in a way it never was when you lived for others. I am Mary Taylor. I am 69 years old. I am the mother of a son who betrayed me, and I am a survivor of my own love. And that, I have discovered, is enough. The doorbell rings. My friends are here. My chosen family is here. My real life is here. I open the door with a smile, a genuine smile that I don't have to fake. And as I hug them and we begin our Saturday afternoon, I think, this is happiness, not the perfect happiness of fairy tales, but the real happiness of a woman who survived the storm and is now dancing in the rain. And you who are reading this, you who may be going through something similar, you who feel that your family has betrayed you, you who wonder if you were worth it. Let me tell you, yes, you are worth it. You were always worth it. And you deserve true love. Love that doesn't hurt. Love that doesn't steal. Love that doesn't betray. And if you don't find it in your blood family, it's okay to create a family of the heart. And you, did you ever feel like they tried to erase you from your own story? Did you ever have to choose between your dignity and the love of someone who didn't truly love you? Tell me your story. Because every shared story is a hand extended to someone who feels alone. Every testimony is a light in someone else's darkness. And together, all of us, we can build something stronger than any betrayal. We can build hope